to order the October 23rd meeting of the Boulder Housing Advisory Board, and we'll start with a roll call. Let's start down on this end.
Dan Theodore.
Judy Nod.
Jacques Riel.
Adam Swedlick.
Juliette Boone.
Terry Palmos.
Mason Moyer.
And we'll hop right into agenda review. Any additions? Yes, Judy. Yes, this is the time if you need an addition.
Okay, I wanted to add something to the agenda that I think should be really brief, perhaps, and I sent it out to all of you. I hope you all got it, that the Community Foundation has their trends report out, and they're willing to come talk to us and present for a half-hour presentation, up to 15 minutes of questions if we want. And the focus this year, they found out, were housing challenges. And so it would give us a good overview of what's going on with the city, with a special focus on housing in the city and county. And I just think it'd be tremendously helpful for framing our conversations. So I would like us to invite them either next month, the month after, or the month after that.
Okay. I added that under matters from the board so we can just have a brief discussion under new business. Okay, going to approval of the minutes. Anyone like to make a motion?
Sure, so moved that we accept the minutes.
And
Second.
seconded. Any discussion about last month's minutes? All right, let's call for the vote here. Those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? And moving on to public participation. We have no one signed up, so we will close public participation. And we are on to matters from the board. Do we have any committee reports? I didn't see any submitted, and I'm on the only standing committee, so.
I don't know that I would consider it, I know I wouldn't consider it a committee report, but it does deal with our regional housing is doing a event up at CU campus all day on Friday called Squeezed Out. And it's got a pretty heavy-hitting lineup of speakers. So if you go to CU Squeezed Out, you'll see the lineup if you're interested in attending anything. The Regional Housing Advisory Board plus CU, no, sorry, I shouldn't have said board. The Regional Housing Group within our housing department with CU put it together.
Perfect, thank you. Anything else? No? Okay, and we'll go into the meat of the conversation for the evening, and the annual letter to council. So did everyone get Judy's draft letter and review it? Can we pull that up, Jay, just so we have something to reference while we're talking?
Kind of missed Jeff's profile picture.
Yeah.
We're going to have to get you one, Jay.
Okay, so just to set the stage here, the annual letter to council. Last time we made it a little long, so we're trying to make it a little bit more brief this time, 2-ish pages maximum. And what we're trying to do is tell them what we did this past year and what we want to do going forward next year. So there was discussion about having another letter halfway through the year, just in case we had anything big coming up, but let's plan on this being the only one, just in case it is the only one. And we'll work from there. So Judy, do you want to talk through this a little bit?
Well, I wanted to get something on paper.
You
Whoop, sorry. I wanted to get something on paper to start up the discussion, so I put some things up there that I thought might be interesting. However, Juliette called me today, and she had been reading it and thinking about it and had a few other ideas. And if she presents her ideas in the same way that she did on the phone, I like them better than mine. So that's where I'm at now. I'm happy to have some of those be the points, or to go to Juliet's, I thought were really good.
Wow. Thanks, Judy. I hope I can remember. Thank you. So in thinking about this annual letter to council and thinking about the life of a council person, the life of a council person is very intense. Most council members have a job that they go to all day. At the end of the day, they come here, and they have undoubtedly spent countless hours reading thousands of pages of packet materials to prepare for their meetings, and then they arrive here and spend another 5, 6, 7, sometimes hours deliberating, thinking, listening, and they're pushed into making decisions, sometimes very late into the night. And I would submit to you that after a 16-hour day, no one's got laser-focused decision-making capability, which is why we don't allow pilots to fly that long. We don't allow truck drivers to be driving that long. Why should we be asking our city council to be making decisions that are critical to our city that late into the night? So in thinking of the broader context, my first recommendation would be to think, how do we help be a little more laser focused in our recommendations to council and help them reduce the number of work plan items that they have, so that they're not doing 17 things, but they're trying to do 4 really great things and be super effective. One of the goals that came out of, or one of the, I guess it was a goal that came out of this year, was that the city was going to focus on achieving the 15% affordable housing goal and moving the needle from where we are at 7.5%. So with that goal in mind, I think we might take that and look at that as a lens for how we work through our plan this year for the next 12 months, and saying everything we look at, we want to look through that lens of achieving that affordable housing goal of 15%. And I know it's a target year later into the future, but making strides towards that goal. And then to get a little bit more specific around that, look at my notes here, is to be able to look at that goal in a way that we can really measure it and track progress towards the goal. So one of the ways that we can better measure is, for example, with respect to housing, is to understand, for example, our 60,000 in-commuters, what is the housing requirement that these 60,000 in-commuters have? What is the housing type preference? What is the socioeconomic diversity that we want in this city in terms of income and other demographics? And to sort of ask the council to help, and we can help with this, put together an objective of what we want this goal to look like. What do we want the mix of citizens to look like? Once we understand that, and we can talk to our in-commuters and we can talk to our existing population about what their housing needs are and how do we achieve that mix, then we can lay out a plan for how are we going to get to that mix of housing and incorporate that into the affordable housing goal. So I'd like to be a little bit more focused on collecting information and data that we can make decisions on, and instead of saying, why don't we try this pilot or why don't we try that pilot? We don't know if that pilot's going to be effective. The other thing is, I think about the poor staff supporting this council and this board, is that if they've got 17 things they've got to work on, and they're running all over the place trying to gather data and trying to summarize it and deliver it in a way that's understandable. And I think that if we can help the staff focus a little bit more, we can get better data that's more useful, make better decisions, and be able to focus on very targeted goals that move the needle going forward. So that was my thought, and I really appreciate that Judy took the time to think about things that we could propose. And so I called her because I wanted her to know that I was going to share this tonight, and I didn't want her to be offended that or blindsided by my comments, or to not value her work. Thank you.
So in addition to everything that Juliet said, which was exactly what we talked about, we also discussed a little specificity about that, and that there obviously is some data out there about in-commuters, but there could be much more. For example, if all the in-commuters would only move here if they moved into single affordable housing and couldn't afford it, then then that should inform our decisions on whatever way we go. If they are happy to have townhouses or apartments, that should inform our decision. So I also think it's key how that data is collected and the questions we ask. There's been a lot of public concern about how that data is collected, what questions are asked. So part of what the specificity that I'm interested in is whatever data is collected, that there's somebody from the public chiming in on how that data is collected and to whom the information is sought. I also wanted another type of data collection. I'm very interested in a really good city and county-wide salary study with AMI attached, because when people say they want teachers and first responders and city staff to be able to live in Boulder, which I believe there's pretty wide agreement on, we don't really know anymore what that means financially and if it's even viable right now without all of that being permanently affordable. So I just want to see a really good data study of that, again, with AMI attached so we know where it works. And then after we do the data collection, that we then start having really good public engagement to discuss what kind of housing, here are the facts, what kind of housing do we as a community really want, and have a more robust public engagement process on that.
Okay, so just to remind everyone, this sounds like an ask of council, since they're the only ones who can allow staff to work on projects. So we can't ask staff to go collect this data. Like, we can't do that. So is that sort of what the intent is here, is make that ask of city council? Just to make sure I'm framing this correctly.
I think what we recommend in order for us to be more effective, in my belief, is that we gather more information about the housing demands that we have, and we marry that. We try to understand what do we want the city to look like from a demographic mix? Do we want to have a third, low income, middle income, and high income? Do we want to have some other mix? And we need to first understand what we want the mix to look like, and then what the desired housing preferences are for the people that are in commuting and the people that already live here that are having trouble affording to live here. And that would help us. Having that data and information would help us be more effective in terms of achieving our goals. So yes, we need to ask them to get more data for us.
So there's a lot of questions in this. I think one, asking staff what it is you actually already are collecting on this, and if you know the information that she's talking about. And two, to be very clear, we're asking then in our letter that goes to City Council for the work plan, you're saying the Housing Advisory Board is requesting city staff do more data collection. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
What I'm requesting is that what our recommendation is that we frame our work plan around more grounded information about housing preferences and what the city wants the outcome to be for housing distribution. And I would like to play a part, our board to play a part in posing those questions and gathering that data, not gathering the data, but getting very specific about the type of data that we're looking for. So instead of just saying.
I don't know what the request is for, I don't get what the exact request is.
Yeah. This, again, sounds as though it's what we're going to be doing. The letter, I believe, is suggestions to put to council for items. In other words, I feel like, I guess I feel a couple of things. One is I feel like a lot of this data is there. It's already existent. I'm just looking right now at the 2014 BBC studied in commuters' salaries, wages, So I believe a lot of the data is there. I think we as a board could, and I don't know that this requires an ask of council in any way, but we could say, let's put these things together in a cogent form, because I think they are scattered about. We can look at how they were collected and the like, but I think a lot of that data is there. So I don't know, to me, it's feeling like it's more of an ask of ourselves. And I don't know if that is necessary to go in the letter to council, unless I'm not getting it.
Well, I thought part of the point of the letter was to say, this is what we would like to work on next year, and we would like you to factor this into your work plan, or we'd like to have this factored into your work plan because it's something that we believe is important. I thought we're recommending what our work plan items be based on what we suggest to council, because they will trickle down to us. But I'm a newer member, so I don't really know how this works, so.
So I guess on that point, I saw it slightly differently. I thought that what we could be doing is request the council direct staff to gather more data on this information. And as I understand the information on in-commuters, it didn't include some questions that would really help inform that. It didn't include, if you could move to Boulder, what type of house you want, because really, if everyone, I mean, just anecdotally, when I met people, we each had someone that we talked to recently that said they don't want to move to Boulder under any circumstances because they want to live in a single-family house that they live in Louisville or Lafayette or whatever, and they know they could never afford to buy a house in Boulder, so they have no intentions of moving here. And I think we need to find out if you could move to Boulder. Questions like that, I don't think it drilled down. And as far as salary, I've tried really hard, and I've asked city council members to help me find those salary studies, and I have not been able to find them. And if they exist, they must be pretty old, because I've been trying for a year and a half.
Well, even if we did a study like this, even if we requested it of city council, we're talking at least probably 2 years worth of data collecting. Like, it's not even going to be available to us in this next year.
Yeah,
It's not even going to trickle down.
Jay weigh in here.
Yeah.
And what questions are we missing? So, I mean, if.
Jay, didn't the city council several years ago hire a group to analyze housing and the in-commuter and all that stuff? I remember coming to many meetings and hearing the presentation, and very, very short summary was, we're really good at expensive homes, and we're really good at inclusionary zoning, you know, whatever it is, FMI, but we're bad at the middle, right? That was the one-sentence summary of thousands of pieces of information that were gathered.
Right.
That report exists somewhere, right?
Yeah, so that's the middle income housing strategy. So that was an outcome of the Housing Boulder effort. So just a little more context in terms of data collection at the city. There is a high level of data collection that's done for the city of Boulder, at the city of Boulder. It's something where our elected officials expect that we collect this data. It might be helpful just to review that with the board at some point. So the Housing Choice Survey, I think, is a great example. We hired BBC Consulting to basically do what you're describing. All right, survey the in-commuters, the people who live in Boulder, what would they like, if they could live in Boulder, if they wanted to live in Boulder, what would they like? You know, I think you're right, a lot of people said, no, I don't want to live in Boulder, I'd rather have a single-family home just outside of Boulder and commute in. Other people said, I'd love to live in Boulder, but I need more than a small condo. I need something, some outdoor open space, something more than just for dogs, potentially, you know, a play area for kids. I don't think those attitudes have changed a whole lot. In terms of the question about, you know, what is the income distribution in Boulder and how has that changed? So the middle income housing strategy looked at, okay, over time, we have been doing very well at retaining sort of the lower income households and the upper income households. It's really that middle. So the middle is being replaced by higher income households. And we're not losing families necessarily, but we are definitely losing the income stratification. So there's a lot of information out there. And it might be helpful for the group to review that. And as well, and I'll talk about this later, the Regional Housing Partnership has done a great job of collecting information on a county-wide level, and then drills down specifically to the cities, and you know, looks at, okay, what is the income of different occupations? What do they need in terms of living here? So anyway, that's just a quick overview. We could delve into it a little deeper if you wanted to. But there has been a lot I just wanted to emphasize there's been a lot that's been collected.
So do you have a salary study then?
I mean, it's not a salary study of every single worker in Boulder. I mean, we will have the American Community Survey next year that will give us very detailed information.
But will it break down? My concern is,
Judy, did you check with Chamber?
I have just checked with the city and with city council members.
I think the Chamber has.
Because
a
what I'm
breakdown on
concerned
this.
about is how we always say we want the teachers and the first responders and city staff and all that to live here. And then we come up with, when I just try and study that on my own by looking at Boulder Valley School District contracts and this and that, and I see what the prices are of market rate housing, and then I see what the salaries are of people in those incomes, it's way more than 30% of their income. So if we truly want those people, we have to focus on housing that those people want for those professions. And I'm not sure we're there yet. I don't feel that we're there yet. So if you think we are, I'd love to see the info.
Well,
Terry?
that's the crux of our problem, right? That statement right there is the crux of our entire housing issue that we have in the city, is that the people that we want to live here often don't make enough to afford to be able to live here. And so what we do is we restrict housing prices, and I think, it's me speaking individually, that a lot of people who could afford the restricted housing prices don't want to live in a restricted appreciation home. They would rather live in the perimeter areas, peripheral areas, and have their home appreciate and have a little more room, and on and on. For me, the data's there, right? Whoa. The data's there. It's out there. The question is, what do we do about it? You know what I mean? What do we do with it? And I think sometimes the answers are just, in order to, okay, nobody wants 60,000 people driving into Boulder, right? We all agree on that. That's a bad thing on every level. Nobody thinks that's good. But to truly solve that in any major way, we would need to create, 3 people per house, 20,000 new houses in Boulder? I mean, that's just not going to happen, under no way that's going to happen. And what kind of houses and what size and what those people want and where they want to live and do they backyard, no backyard? I mean, there's so many variables that go into all this information that we're trying to gather and answer these questions. And then we have the information, and then what do we do about it? Okay, do we change all the zoning laws to allow, I mean, I think that's just such a big thing. Maybe it would be better to focus on something that we can influence and can control a little bit better, have some impact versus talking theory.
Jay, did you have something?
Just a little bit more context. Sorry, I'll be brief. So, over the years, as the city has adopted various housing goals, there has been a sort of desire to segment that out, say, okay, well, our goal is 15%. How much do we want of, very low versus moderate? I think there's been a recognition that a lot of what we do in terms of providing affordable housing in the city is very opportunistic. So as opportunities arise, we want to take advantage of those. If we have a partner who's willing to put forward a significant amount of money on a specific site and they see a specific need, we want to be able to encourage that. So we've intentionally stayed away from having specific targets, but things do come up. So like the middle income housing strategy, shined a spotlight on the need for middle income housing, permanent supportive housing. How do we transition people from homelessness into homes? So those two are sort of the 2 most recent priorities at the city in terms of housing. And then we've been able to try to focus our resources towards those. So I don't know if that helps, but that's just a little bit more of the context.
Yes.
And I appreciate that, because I think that's really part of the thing here. I mean, we started off with that whole notion of setting a nice firm goal of 15%, and how do we get there? Once we started delving into this conversation, we're presupposing a lot of things that, yes, we want teachers, we want first responders, in lieu of who? I mean, where's the priorities? So I don't know where the priorities are. Maybe that's one of the things we can ask is, where do you want us to focus or prioritize? A lot of what I've heard here outside of that larger subset really becomes something that's either educational sessions, where maybe something that staff can, figure out a way to funnel us the information that I know they have and that they've, have pretty meticulously and stuff. And I've worked with BBC plenty of times. They do a really good job. But funneling us that information and having these listening sessions to say, okay, if you're an in-commuter, right, we want to have a listening session rather than have, the last one where it was like this broader question that, kind of say, if you're an in-commuter, we want to hear from you. What kind of housing in Boulder are you looking for? Realizing that, there's a certain limitation of what we could do as opposed to if you live outside of Boulder, right? So starting to have those listening sessions where we get some direct public input or conversation on those things, because, the bottom line too is that when we talk about data, well, data when we're talking about these things are really surveys, which are talking to particular people, and everybody's going to feel a little bit differently. So for every person who says, I want a single-family house, so my dogs can run around the yard and a fence and not get run over, there's people who say, I'd love to live in a condo in the city. And I think the point that Jay made, which is that, housing, particularly in a community like this, has to be opportunistic, which means, we have our goals or we have our priorities, which hopefully, that's one of the things that we can approach council with in terms of, point us in the right direction. But then when something comes up, whatever it is, we really need to take that opportunity, whatever it may be, when that opportunity arises, because it comes and goes. So.
Mason.
So I'm curious how you want to roll with this. Are we going to throw our ideas out, or?
Yeah, I realize we're getting real all over the place here. So honestly, we haven't had this process except for the last time we did this, and that was almost a completely different group of people. So, I really like looking through the lens of the 15% permanently affordable housing goal. Almost all of us voted for that. Almost all of us think that's one of the highest priorities of the city. So I really do like that idea of looking through that lens and trying to focus what we're doing on that. The second thing I think is really important is our engagement that we have done with the community. I see our board as sort of the way that people get to say the things they normally don't get to say to people about housing. So I really like those two parts especially, and I hope we can focus on those. Yes.
So again, my question is, how are we going to structure this? Are we just rolling out all our ideas, or how are we?
Yeah, let's just go down the list. I think that's going to be the only way that everyone gets heard for a little bit, and then we can sort of try to find a commonality in that.
Okay.
Okay, so do you want to add anything to yours before we go? Okay.
I'll wait.
Gotcha. Mason, do you want to start?
Well, one, Judy, I really appreciated what you put together, and thank you for condensing it to 2 pages. I think that was awesome, given what we had. I saw where you were going to with the same thing, and it was interesting because bringing up the data and this different lens. Adam and I attended the BHP meeting due to a couple of people requesting that they were having some issues through BHP, and I'm pretty sure most of us at some point or another is hearing from, like, when Boulder Junction came, and what I'm seeing is that there's no place. I mean, we have renters mediation, but we have no place for people to go to be heard and, what's the word I'm looking for? Not, with their complaints, with their, like what we were talking about. I mean, they can go to BHP, but like when I got my space taken away from me at Ponderosa, my only remedy was to come to the housing board that evicted me with my complaint. So there's no oversight committee. So I'm curious what an oversight piece or element with us would look like, where we could hear people's concerns and questions. So that was something that I was thinking about, especially after BHP, was that maybe it's a separate set of eyes. Maybe there's a committee that we just listen to if people bring us those thoughts, concerns, and are requesting oversight, that it's something that we listen to instead of when we very first formed, people would just come and we really didn't know how to take the information or what to do with it next. So again, the request is some form of an oversight committee where maybe a couple of us are on it or something like that. I also agree with you, Adam. The listening sessions, I think, are our mojo. So outside of what the city is telling us their working plan is for us and focusing us, I think getting really clear in what you're saying, what I'm hearing from you, Danny, is that if we're taking that lens and we say that an issue is coming down the pike, like we see the council's agenda, we can set up, maybe 4 listening sessions through the year, or maybe there's a half-hour listening session. We get so good at these that they become a half-hour listening session with every meeting or something like that. And we can say to people is like, this discussion is coming up on council, so the month before we're going to do a listening session and see if there's anything we could get together in our recommendation for what we're hearing from the people that goes to council. So those are my 2 recommendations, is that we get really focused and fine-arted on our listening sessions, and that we consider putting together a committee for oversight for the people.
Terry?
Just so I understand, what we're trying to do here is add to what we want to put in the letter for council? Is that what we're talking about?
So yeah, we're trying to determine essentially what our agenda is outside of their agenda.
So we're not talking about Judy, what the letter to council is?
We are talking about what the letter to council is. She
I'll make
just
it- I'll
made
make
her
it
2
short.
suggestions as to
I'll make
what
it
we
short.
might do next year.
I think Judy's outline is great. I liked a lot of it. I would emphasize personally on the first 2 items, which is tiny homes and large lots. I think those 2 go together. I think putting more tiny homes on these bigger lots solves a lot of problems. So I would like to emphasize those 2 things out of what Judy put up there, but I would think what Judy did is great.
Thank you. Anything else to add?
I think it's too many things, and we need to narrow it down, and we don't know that any of these are proven without more information. So that's my comment.
Okay. Again, I really do like the looking through the lens. I think it's council's job to sort of put the projects on the plate that are going to get us to the 15% permanent affordable housing goal. So our part in that is continuing what we have been doing and weighing in on those projects, considering the facts that, what we say to those projects may determine how much those percentages end up being and how much they ultimately add to the permanently affordable housing goal. I also really like the thought of adding an oversight committee. That can be a separate committee. The full board doesn't have to be involved. It can just be a couple people who listen to concerns on a consistent basis. And I like the fine tuning of the listening sessions. Again, I think that's been our biggest value add as a board, because council doesn't have time to focus on a lot of the details and a lot of the things that fall through. And while they hear a lot of resident concerns, if people knew that the housing board was here for specifically their housing issues, and that we could learn and reach out to specific groups to hear things that, council will never hear because they don't have that time to reach out, I think that's our biggest value add. So those are also my 2 biggest focuses, and I don't think that adds too much to our plan beyond what council is already wanting us to do.
Judy, thanks for the letter. That was great. I needed something to, I got to turn it on first. It was great to have something to focus in around and get me thinking. I guess my thoughts were first just to kind of respond to Judy's list, because I had comments on each one of those things. And number 1, simple, and basically agree with that one, which is just, am I not close enough?
There you go.
Okay. Kind of the congratulating council for progress so far. Number 2 was the 2A was pilot project for tiny homes. I like that. I would like to see us consider a broader scope of a pilot project. In other words, there are other opportunities besides tiny homes that may come up that offer significant community benefit. And if there's some way to get the city process, let's say short-tracked or fast-tracked for projects that are of a small scope and are showing significant community benefit in affordable housing, then I think that could be something that would be really worthwhile. There are ideas, we're testing them out on alpine balsam on a huge scale, when what we could be doing is saying, oh, here's one block or half of a block. Let's see how this concept works. So I like the idea of a pilot project, but I think that the scope, ideally, if we looked at it, could be more broad than just tiny homes. So I'd like to see it not limited to just tiny homes and be more of a pilot program. The large lots discussion, I don't know if that's something that we, again, as Juliette's point of not getting too many things on the plate and too spread out, I think it's something we definitely should go back to as a city. But again, that's a more broad discussion that has to do with zoning in general, and I don't know that, it's going to be an independent variable, so to speak. Expanding sub-community planning, Judy, my concern was just that I don't know how staff would possibly manage that load. Was my only thought about it. It's like, I agree. And again, it comes back to maybe a broader citywide zoning assessment. Working with the state, I had a question actually, and I think Jay, we may have talked to this a little bit at the agenda meeting, but the city already has some form of organization around the legislative agenda for the state, right? That the city's saying, okay, here are the things that we're looking at. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
But just a little bit more, there is a desire to have HAB take a more active role in advocating for a housing agenda at the legislature.
Okay.
And that's something that we would talk about in probably February, having the Housing Colorado Executive Director come and talk about their agenda for housing for the upcoming legislative session and how HAB could help advocate.
How we could advocate. Okay, because I do think that that's a super important item as far as affordable housing is concerned right now on the state level. So yeah, if there's some way that we could get engaged with that, I think that's a worthy one to say, can we have that on our work plan, or how do we do that engagement? What would that look like? What's that? Well, yeah, to some degree, I suppose, if we express from our side an interest in it, it's valuable. Preserving existing housing stock, I don't know how that one works. I feel like it's a really sticky one as far as first right to refusal on purchasing properties. And then the last one, supports for renters. I guess the question would be just to flesh that out, and what is that talking about? Maybe something more along the lines of what Mason's saying with this listening council, although I did have a question about that, like, does that become a quasi-judicial thing, or are we creating an expectation with it, or just how we'd form it? But I think it's an interesting idea along that line. My pieces that I would put on here, I think, kind of fall into some of those. But one that's somewhat separate is I would really like to see an assessment and a review, and this has to do with middle-income housing, of how the current city ordinances and regulations as a whole impact our ability to maintain middle-income housing. And I think that there's a big hit that we're taking on middle-income families because of our processes within the city.
I just want to ask one thing there. That's not something that we would be doing. That's just an ask of council.
I think we could, so the role that I would see, yeah. Well, the role for HAB that I would see in that is along the lines of listening sessions.
Okay.
And then along the lines of actually doing the research to say, we're looking at these aspects. For instance, when the city says you got to have 1.75 kilowatts to meet your energy requirements, well, that's an ROI that never gets returned. It's, it's so expensive to put 1.75 kilowatts, to find other ways to offset or do other things that don't impact the cost, because When you take a middle-income family and you add $20,000 to the cost of their tiny remodel, it's game over. And I've talked to 3 clients in the last 3 years at least who've said, we're moving, we're out of here. So this is something that's in the culture of the city, and I think it would be really valuable to look into. Might be difficult, but it's something that I think would be valuable to help people stay here. So that's kind of one on my plate. The other one is the more broad question of zoning, and I think somebody said, well, you know, kind of taking these smaller bites. Affordable housing is a huge issue. We know it. So I don't see how the small bites are going to get us there. And so if we're going to do something as a board, I think we need to take big bites. And we need to stop saying, well, let's tweak this here. We have a 15%. I think we need to try to go beyond that. And this one isn't necessarily an ask, but I think it's just something to consider as we're looking at this. And if we can come up with something to say, how are we addressing zoning? Should we be looking at single-family zoning and saying this is inappropriate anymore from historic purposes, for future purposes? It doesn't serve us as a city. So I'd like to look into those things, and I'd like to suggest to the city council that they start looking into those things seriously. The other piece is kind of comes along the line of Judy's first right of refusal. And that one is simply identifying properties, much as we have done over the years with open space. We've had a very robust program to go out and say, ding, 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 ding. These are all properties. They're privately owned. They may be available at some point. We need to be forward-thinking and looking at them. And I don't know, Jay, you may have an answer for how well that's been done so far with housing properties.
I would say Boulder Housing Partners is extremely active in identifying properties to purchase. They're constantly looking at what's on the market, what's coming up on the market. A lot of times they're approached by property owners in Boulder who are interested in offering. The problem is they often can't compete with, you know, cash offers from other buyers. But, you know, it's definitely something that is on their radar, and the city definitely encourages that. There have been lots of efforts to identify sort of properties owned by the city and the county, you know, public land that would be appropriate for affordable housing. It's challenging. I mean, there's a reason why those properties haven't been developed over time. Either they're in a floodplain or they just have a lot of issues associated with them.
Yeah.
But that's something that we constantly look at as well.
So that's, yeah, that was kind of a question on my part. So, and it sounds like BHP has that list. Okay. That's it. So, yeah, those are my things.
I would also like to add to that particular point that I've called Laura, is it Laura Scheinman? Is that her name? Before, and she is like so on that. And I told her of a property that I knew that was going to become available, and she called me right back and she said, they're doing it off market. They won't let us enter into it. And I mean, she is like all over that particular piece. So that's good. So I just wanted to reiterate the purpose of this letter, and having read all the letters that boards send each year to city council, there's really 2 parts. One, telling them what we're doing and what we're going to want to do in the next year. And then the second part of what we're asking them to put on their work plan. And I'm not sure we have to worry about, you know, I remember Crystal telling us at a meeting that every year city council gives 4 or 5 things, probably not more than 4 or 5 things, I think she said, that they would like council to put in their work plan. And it's taken several years for some of them to get on the council's work plan, but they just keep trying with things that they think are important. So council will certainly make the decision on what they want to put on their work plan or not. I think for the first part of the letter, when we say what we're doing, mentioning that we want to continue the listening sessions, and certainly having one, several of you have talked about regulations and stuff before, and we certainly should do one on that, as well as other topics. And I really like Mason's idea of having oversight committee The one thing we'd have to talk through is, not only do we want people to be heard, but then is there something that board can tangibly do after that to help the person a little bit? Because being heard is one thing, and that vents their frustration somewhat, but can we actually then, do we want to try and connect them to the right city staff person or whatever? I just think that's something to talk about. But I think both of those things are good for what we're doing. For what we're asking is a completely different subject, and they will pick. It's like when you go into a buffet, and we're the ones setting the table for the buffet, and they're the ones picking what they want to select to eat. So I think if we have 4 or 5 things, I don't think that's going to be too many. And I just wanted to speak to the 4 or 5 I have, as long as I had them there. I like the idea of a pilot project for tiny homes or other new ideas on a small scale, changing it the way you suggested. Revisiting the large lot discussion. The only reason I put that on there is the large lot discussion came from neighbors requesting that there not be so many McMansion scrapes, and somehow that subject seems to transmogrify into should there be more ADUs or triplexes or whatever on those large lots, but the issue of scrapes never got addressed, and I felt there was neighborhood, it's not my neighborhood, but I thought there was some dissatisfaction about that. But if it gets voted down, it gets voted down. The reason why I'm interested in sub-community planning is, although it definitely would take more staff time, I think it would ease their life and pull them off of other projects that are consuming so much staff time, community time, and council time, because the same issues keep coming up over and over and over again. And I think it's fair to say to each subcommunity, you have to do your part for permanently affordable housing. Either you have to demonstrate that your neighborhood already has 15% affordable housing in your neighborhood, or you have to come up with ideas for it that works for you. And I think you settle that that whole discussion in a much more coherent way and take the pressure off all these continual fights over and over and over. So that's why I like sub-community planning. In the tax incentive thing, definitely there is a committee that works on that, but I think if we put our recommendation that we think that's really important, perhaps that'll give them extra incentive. And preserving existing housing stock, again, that's something that I think the city is trying to do, but if we, again, emphasize that that's really important. And then the support for renters, I just think that 50% of residents in the city are renters, approximately, and we should mention some considerations for them. So that's all.
Okay. Well, I really like the structure of the letter, and I like the content of the letter, and so I kind of really like this approach. Within that, I like the notion of having some reference there that we're looking through the lens of the 15%, like we've talked about, is kind of the premise of everything that we talk about thereafter. I think the listening sessions are a really important part of this letter and a really important part of what we can do, because I think we can be a really effective conduit for maybe some unruly public input at times, but be able to kind of funnel that into the board, because like you said, to the council, because like you said, they when they're on their 16th hour, it's nice to have that already disseminated for them. So I really think that's an important thing, and I think the whole notion of letting them know that we really want to try to focus on those this year, and we think it can be an effective thing. We want to collaborate with the council in conducting those listening sessions, so that if there is a big issue that they're going to be considering, Mason, like you said, that we can kind of get a jump on that for them. Going through the list that we have here, I think the list is really good. I like the idea of expanding the notion of a pilot project, but I think that can be very effective, and I'm very supportive of that. The large lots, it seems to me from kind of the outside looking in, being new again, that it is kind of a sticky subject, and I don't know if the town or the council's going to want to hear from us that, we'll reopen that, can of worms. And so I'm not really sure about that one. I'm a little more lukewarm about that one. And I'm sorry, a little cynical to the whole notion of the sub-community planning, because I think what happens with that is it becomes an incredible onus on staff to try to do all that sub-community planning, and when push comes to shove, it still becomes layers and layers of essentially master plans, and you're still looking at things from the, the overall global level, even no matter what you have dialed down to the sub-community. And so I think that's a very big work task to ask or to present there, and so I'm a little reluctant on that one. The state one, I think, I agree that, maybe to expand that a little and say, what can we do to help be an advocate at the state level to work with, CML or whatever other lobbyists or advocates that we have that we're already coordinating with, so that we can give them direct input and we can play a more active role there. So not just tax incentives, but everything else. And the thing that I'd point out that I'd like to see some sort of mention here of, out of all the meetings that I've been to, we've had some comments that the majority of them from people who live in mobile home communities, which is a very touchy subject, but that woman came and spoke from CU Law last time around, and that was regarding an issue at the state that was a matter of pretty grave concern. And I think that's a great example of that is housing right now, and there are people who have made their lives there, and I think it's incumbent upon us to be able to relay those things and say, that's part of what we want to do, and that's part of what we'd like to see. Maybe some direct reference to that particular point, or at least to saying, how can we do that to be an advocate, I think is really important. Preserving existing housing stock seems really, really daunting to me. I'm not sure how to do that one, so that's the other one that I'm kind of reluctant on the list here. Everything else I'm really in support of. I think the whole notion of having some sort of clearinghouse or some sort of process for renters is absolutely something that we can be doing. And the point, you made the excellent point in here that we're talking about half of the populace, and that it's really something that we need to focus on here. So in terms of all that, those are my feelings on that. In terms of what I throw into there, that I think this whole notion, we've talked about it pretty much every meeting since I've been here, and the whole notion that there's some ability to either expedite a process or have something that's a little less discretionary of a process if somebody's coming in and trying to provide the type of housing that we're looking for. And maybe it's a listening session, I don't know what it is, that I don't know how we want to articulate it, but I really do think it's that, and it's the middle income families that really do feel the squeeze with that, because all those incremental costs of the process and the timing of the process really come to bear with them. If you're building a high-end project, you can go through it and you can roll through it because you know what's waiting there on the other end. So I really think that if we're talking about how we're going to facilitate these things, that's something that we need to tackle sooner rather than later. The last thing that I have is just from my own thoughts and impressions sitting here. We're talking a lot about the in-commuters and stuff. So I'll just use the school district as an example, is what can we do to collaborate with employers to say, let's work together as a municipality and as those employers, whether they be another institution like the school district or whether they be a large employer, to try to work on that housing issue for in-commuters and for your employees. So for instance, for example, a school district, I think it's absolutely appropriate. It's legally defensible for a school district to focus on utilizing general fund monies or what other plenty of other type of revenues, capital fund, to try to say, we want to try to figure out what we can do to help augment the housing opportunities for our staff. And so that's the one thing that I'm throwing in there as an addition. How do we collaborate with different institutions and different employers to help solve this problem? Because that's really going to be something where any help we can get, and that's something where, let them take the burden on too, because those people are coming in and providing that service to the employer. And that can be one way that the employer even provides compensation. That's my only thought. I love the letter. I like the structure. I'd say the 15% as an overarching thing, and then looks good. And I think we could do that in 2 pages, more or less, depending on what font we use. So.
Okay, so now that we're an hour in and we have all of our ideas on the table, I think we just have to do straw polls in order to see where the few areas of greatest interest across the board are. Keep in mind, everyone can still email or talk to council members on their own behalf about what their personal suggestions are to the council work plan next year. But we're trying to make decisions as a full board about what we can focus on and what we can actually accomplish and what we think it's most important for council to accomplish. So, yes.
So I think that's a great idea. Can we divide it into two parts, where the first part is what we want to say about what we're doing, so we can add in Mason's idea?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff for us and then stuff that we would ask of them
Yeah.
here. So, like the oversight committee, that's a thing for us. Like, and I think we definitely need to flesh that one out a little bit more, but we could mention it in the letter as one of the possibilities of what we might do next year, because we think that's a really important thing to have for renters. So yes, let's try to go through first the things that are for council that we're going to suggest to them that they put on their work plan. And we're going to have to go through the list. So can you start at the top again? And yes.
So are we going to divide up the council thing also by two parts potentially? So should we go through Judy's list first and then talk about the ones we've wanted to add on and see if we could whittle down to like 4
Yeah. Even that might be too many.
for the buffet? And we need to be very clear about the buffet thing.
Because,
Right.
remember, we got, our language in the last letter wasn't clear about what we were offering, so.
Yeah.
I guess I have a before question. The overarching focus on 15% that Juliet had first mentioned, how about if we decide on that first? Because if we all agree on that, that can be the very first part of it that will frame everything else.
Yeah, so my idea here was we frame it with the 15%, and then these are the things that we think council should focus on to help us get there. Does that sound about right? Okay. First of all, then let's just do a straw poll. Putting at the sort of the headline is, we're trying to help reach the 15% goal.
I can't see Jacques' arm, but yes.
Down.
It's down.
Oh, you're down? I'd like to know why. Yeah,
Just because I think it's,
you're not on.
turn it off. Just because I still approach this, that 15% is nowhere near our need.
I absolutely agree
So,
with you, and I contemplated saying that maybe our overarching line is 15% or more.
Right, and I think council's already even said that.
Yeah.
So
agree.
I would just want to form it in some way. And I agree that the concept, I actually agree with, saying, okay,
Yeah.
look, we've decided on 15%. Let's let's
That or
give
more.
that. But still to recognize that that does not meet our need.
I'm totally fine putting a plus after that 15, if that,
Yeah.
There you go.
okay. So with the plus,
Then straw poll? Okay, with the plus.
you two are no with the plus. Okay.
Yeah. Closing the door.
Okay, well, we still have 5, so I'm sorry. Okay, moving on to individual items for council to help us reach that 15% goal. And we'll start with Judy's letter. And the first thing on there I see, the previous work plan, obviously that's going to continue to happen. Pilot project for tiny homes, yeah. People's interests in that one? Straw poll?
May I make a comment before we
Yes.
straw poll? So after reading your letter too, just so that we have a minor update and you're aware of the fact that Holly Rogan was talking about the fact that Lions in December passed tiny homes as ADUs, but literally nobody applied for the plan, so they have opened it up for the entire city for tiny homes because they were going to start with just 12. And kind of like our ADU things is that nobody's knocking down the door to run and put them up. It's the same thing there, so they've just expanded their pilot program to include the entire city. So I like the idea of what you were talking about, Jacques, about maybe it's more than just this tiny house pilot. To me, it seems like it would be an easy goal as well if we said the tiny houses, because I think if we collect the information that Lions has coupled with some of our ADU numbers that are probably coming through now, we might be able to form a request by our June, July letter.
So
make
I,
sense?
I have this down as 2 separate items, just so you know, like
Tiny house or
a
tiny?
tiny house project and then a streamlining of prototyping project.
Pilot
Yeah,
project.
pilot project.
Grander scope
Yes,
of types.
just so everyone knows.
Okay.
So that one is coming separately.
Oh, so we're not comfortable just saying tiny home or other creative small project? You want it as 2 separate things?
Yes.
Okay, and I also want to mention, besides Lions, Longmont is in the process of doing one, tiny homes for veterans, and they're quite far along with it, and they have a lot of information.
Yep.
Cool. So just tiny homes right now.
Adam,
Yes,
if I might.
you may.
So tiny homes has been on a council's work plan for many, many years. I think part of the problem, that this is just my personal observation, it's not very well defined. Everybody has a very different conception of what a tiny home is. So like, is it a house on wheels? Is it on fixed foundation? What exactly are we trying to achieve? Who are we serving? Is it for transitional housing for homeless? Is it high-end design so someone can rent it out on Airbnb in their backyard? Are we going to allow people to basically permanently park their RV in their yard? So I mean, just being super clear about what it is, the intent behind the tiny homes, I think would help.
And I think what we're talking about when we do this as well is, as an advisory board and taking off of one of the things of the 100 things that city council would have, is that that's the stuff we would dive into the question of what does that look like? Like, we could go right away and look at Lions. How did they define it? How have other communities defined it? What do we see the biggest need of? It's always, of course, the social cause going through with the vets or homeless is going to make it more palatable to some than simply going, like Lions was able to move it forward due to the flooding. But those are the questions I think we as a group start to talk about and see if we can form a consensus for a recommendation.
And the first step is getting it on council's work plan.
Yep.
I'm not sure I want to define it any more narrowly than tiny homes, because I don't want it to go, oh, if they only would have said tiny homes for veterans instead of tiny homes for homeless, we would have done it for sure. It's like, to me, that's, council can look into that. I just want to say that we have an interest in trying out a pilot project for tiny homes, and they can work, or they can toss it back to us and say, define it better.
Maybe it's not tiny house pilot, but in the wording we say we're interested in researching and seeing if we can come to, as a board, a recommendation for a pilot idea on tiny houses.
I'd say it should be a tiny RV, and then it should be okay.
Yes.
I think if we say it the way you suggested, then it's not in a recommendation to council. That's something we might want to look into, that we, of course, can look into if we want to. We're asking council to direct staff to bring them information about tiny home projects, and then council debate it. If we say this is something we want to look into, that should go, we should vote on that for the upper part of the letter, not this
I
part.
understand.
So you asked that we make a recommendation before they even tell us to. And we're asking them that we weigh in,
Right, I'm the latter. I'm not the,
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
saying it in the latter is
Yes.
that what we would do is request that they give us the opportunity to see if we could research and form a recommendation.
Well, what if we call it a pilot, if we articulated this as a pilot project to define and explore tiny homes or something like
Yeah.
that, so that it's,
that sounds pretty reasonable. Yes, Julianne. Yes, we are.
Thank you. Why don't we take it off and put it down as a listening session so that we can get a lot of input about what a tiny home is, what the upsides and the downsides, and where they're best applied. And then we can get really good information from a lot of different sources and inform ourselves on how we might want to recommend moving forward with that.
I think since we have talked about this last year too, that we're beyond the point where we're just want to listen about it. And I think that could be a really important part in the feedback. But this is something that most of us on the board prior really wanted to see it on their work plan.
Is the idea of what we're doing here to get through these 4 or 5 things, straw poll, say yes or no, Or should we be debating them every one as we go?
I didn't want to debate them everyone as we go, but we just didn't have a clear enough definition.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say yes or no, and I'm still not clear what I'm saying yes or no
Ultimately, don't we
to.
have to make a motion and then discuss it and all that stuff? Or is that not part of it?
We're just doing straw polls for the
I
letter.
understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And
I
ultimately,
have
we're-
one more point I want to make. The council makes up their work plan for 2 years at a time, it seems, and then the second year, they just maybe modify a little bit. So if there's things we're really interested in, like tiny homes, which almost made it to their work plan last time, but didn't quite get there, it's not likely to get there in this 2-year cycle. So if we think it's worth them exploring, with the option that they can give it back to us if they want, I think, I think we should go for it now rather than wait.
This is why I think just saying, we'd like to see a tiny home project in the city of Boulder, a tiny home pilot project in the city of Boulder, and make it,
Agree.
that's it.
Put it on the list.
Straw poll. 6. Okay. Large lots and single-family homes. I just want to say, I think if they want us to talk about this, they're going to tell us to. I think this is going to come back up, but we can, if we want to say something explicit about it, then we can do a straw poll for it. And I'm totally fine with that.
I
So-
would agree with you. I think it's going to come back up.
You think it's going to come back up? Okay. Do we want to say anything explicitly about that? Otherwise, we'll just pass it by. Okay, passed by. Sub-community planning and neighborhoods, one at a time.
I'm going to be the only one.
We'll do a straw poll, yep. Okay. So all we have is tiny homes so far, pretty good. This next one, this is more our choice for what we want to work on, not something that we would ask of them, I don't think. Right, Jay?
For what?
The working with state for tax incentive and AH and rent control. I think, so we'll deal with that in the next section.
Oh, actually, I'd really like that to be a recommendation, that they ramp up their efforts. You said, I thought you said once that when that came up for the state, no matter what the committee who works on that with council, nobody went down there to do it. And so I'd like to make clear that we would like that to be on their work plan, working, we're suggesting or requesting that they are more vigorous in working with the state about housing issues.
Okay, well, we'll just do a straw poll on asking council to be more vigorous, as in going to the meeting. I know they sent a letter about the rent control bill. So we'll do a straw poll real quick about that. Or
potentially move it to also a committee with us. Could it be that one or two people, again, we make a committee that attends those and reports back to our group?
that's also a good idea.
So it doesn't have to be a request of them.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you still want to try to make a request of them?
No, if everyone's willing to put it up.
Yeah, I think it,
Sorry, put what up to the top?
For the first part of the letter, have it be one of our things that we state that we're interested in forming a committee
Okay,
to do that.
gotcha. Well, we'll pass it by right here then. Okay, preserving existing housing stock. That's what I think all of our programs, like the middle income housing strategy, are for, so I'm not sure we really need to say anything about that. Anyone disagree? Okay. This
we're
one-
passing.
Yeah, we're passing on preserving existing housing stock. Supports for renters, including those in permanently affordable housing. Did you want to see this as a suggestion to council, or is that more of a
I think
thing that we
there's-
work on?
I think there's some way that we should emphasize, my wish was that we emphasize that 50% of our population, of our residents are renters. And what are you saying?
Your mic, just a
Oh,
touch
sorry, that
closer.
50% of our population are renters, and we'd like to see council focus some attention on them. Something as simple as that.
We don't have a specific ask of them, though.
Okay.
Okay.
Can
Yeah.
What about defining the, asking city council to define what we want the population mix to look like and what housing preferences and needs of that population are going to meet the demand that population has, so that we can focus our initiatives around that through our 15% lens.
Chuck?
Can I say something to that? I think that, maybe not directly in that manner as far as the population mix goes, but I do think that, I mean, I don't think we're going to put it on the letter, but the question is really, what are we doing? Are we still on Danish as 1%? Or are we changing that? And going forward as a town, considering where we stand right now with jobs, housing balance, et cetera, that's a big discussion. So I don't, yeah.
That's not.
So do I hear you saying that?
Sorry, she had first.
Do I hear what's being said is we want council to decide if our doors are closed or open? Because that's what I'm hearing. Like, I'm hearing if we ask them to decide what the makeup of the population is, are we saying we want 20% black, we want 20% white, we want 20%? I don't understand how we ask council to define what the makeup of our population looks like. I mean, I feel a little.
Juliet?
I'm talking more about socioeconomic stratification, like to Jay's point about the middle getting squeezed out. Do we want the middle to continue to get squeezed out, or is that a problem for our city?
Well, I think we've already defined it as a problem as our city, and we even see an initiative coming through on this election.
So what portion of the middle income do we want to see living in our city? Do we want it equally distributed among the other socioeconomics? I mean, so if we don't even know what that is, what that percentage is, then how can we possibly help push housing initiatives that are going to attract that middle income population and allow them to live here?
Jay, do we have goals?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And strategies as well. But I mean, your point is well taken, is, how do we benchmark that? I mean, it's a bit challenging to define exactly what is that percentage. I think the way the city has looked at the middle income is we don't want to lose any more. Ideally, we would gain some ground back, but there are much larger market forces at play here in terms of the middle class all across the US. And it's really difficult to try to, deal with that at the local level. Although it doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
And along those lines, like, how do we incentivize projects? When we look at building housing, who are we building it for? Right? That's the bottom line. Or who are we building the housing? Or when we allow projects, or when projects happen?
Maybe the question is it Boulder middle class or real world middle class? Because those are two different things.
Right? Totally.
Middle class in Boulder is a very different middle class than the federal middle class standards,
Right.
Before anyone goes, I don't want to spin out anymore.
Sorry.
So
Sorry. I didn't mean to.
it sounds like
another example. So, the middle income strategy comes out, and we adopt a more robust goal for middle income. We also did the inclusionary housing update project in 2018, and we included incentives. So for smaller projects, 20 or less units, if you put all those units on site, they can all be middle income. So that's an incentive for a developer to provide that middle income housing. We have ratcheted up the middle income requirement for annexations as a result of the strategy. There are other IH incentives. So basically the percentage can switch if you put more on site. So, I mean, we are constantly looking for new tools to encourage middle income housing. The challenge is, we're not always going to be, it's going to take a while for those efforts to bear fruit.
So do you still want a straw poll on housing mix? Okay. And I'll let you phrase it. How about that? What would be your ask of council?
So to define what we would like the population, the socioeconomic population mix to look like in terms of income, and what, based on the housing preferences and needs of that mix, what do we need to encourage around development to meet those needs and preferences? Clear enough or not really?
I think that was pretty clear. So straw poll. 2.
Okay. I thought that an idea emerged from here that was really good, to consider that we request the council expedite, whatever you call it, regulations for permanently affordable housing.
Not there yet.
Oh. That's the next thing on the list.
Okay. Now we're going through mostly what I would define as Jacques' list. The pilot project fast track, do you want to say a specific ask you would have of council for that so that we can straw poll it?
Yeah, the specific ask would be that the city of Boulder look at developing a pilot project for housing that provides a community benefit in the sense of affordable housing. So if any kind of project, doesn't matter what it is, but if it can suggest, I'm looking at small scope projects defined as, that's why it's called a pilot project. So any housing project that will provide a significant density of affordable housing can apply for a side track to the regular permitting process. Yep.
Terry?
I think what you're saying is, if there's an affordable housing component, it gets approved faster and easier, quicker. Is that what you're saying?
For certain, yeah, exactly, for specific projects that, again, are small in
So
scope.
somebody comes in with a, whatever, 5-unit deal,
Yeah.
2 of them are affordable, that doesn't have to go through the regular channels of approval? Is that what you're saying?
So I would be, I mean, this would be a part of looking at what this is, but I would say that it's something that is a specific kind of style or effort at development. It's not just, oh, I'm going to develop an affordable housing project with 5 units, but for instance, the discussion of Wooner streets and low car density neighborhood or spaces, that type of a project.
Might we say fast-tracking affordable housing? Hey, there's a slogan.
Yeah.
Adam?
Yeah.
Jay, did planning board do something similar to this just now, like within the last 2 meetings? Make a similar request that the city consider fast-tracking affordable housing if somebody had a certain percentage of a plan? Or is it coming? Because I feel like there's a conversation occurring right now about this.
Community benefit included at 40% if you have more than 40% for permanently affordable.
Then you're
You
being
can-
fast-tracked?
Know that you can take advantage of the additional height.
Yeah.
I haven't seen planning board's letter to council, so I'm not
I feel like there was a
certain what you,
conversation.
but I think what Terry's talking about is expedited review. That's what it's often referred to for affordable housing projects. That's one. Jacques, what I've heard you describe before is if there's something that's outside of the current, of what's currently allowed by zoning, that should get some consideration.
So there's 2 pieces
Yeah,
in there.
correct. I'm looking for, instead of having to try to go through the standard process, or, I mean, which is years and years, to get any type of a zoning variance or a change in what you're allowed to do, that we can try to pilot things. Tiny homes are one example of what that could look like. David Adamson's North Street project and concept is another example of that. We're looking at trying to create a different model for housing on a 1-block area. That there be some kind of format for that. And I know you said that it's been kind of looked at before and kicked around. I just think it's worth maybe putting a little more effort into.
Danny?
Just in the interest of brevity, because I think we're on the same exact page here. For this letter, if we just said something like explore expedited review procedures for projects with affordable housing and other significant community benefits or something like that. Because I think that's what we're saying, and there's a lot of nuance to it. And then, but
Yeah.
as far as kicking it off as a work plan, because I think we've had that conversation before, where having some notion of a concept where there's a process that provides certainty in terms of timing and in terms of, discretion, when you're, stepping up and doing the right thing. I think if we lay it out that way, to me, I think that gets the message across. And then there's a lot of nuance to it, I agree,
Yeah.
where it's appropriate, but that's probably for another day, would be my thought in terms of how we articulate it.
Yeah, this is kind of like the tiny homes thing to me. You just got to put something up there and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to say that exact same thing again?
What I said. Yeah, expedited review for projects providing affordable housing and/or other significant community benefits.
You said explore expedited review.
Yeah.
Yeah, explore
Sorry, that's right.
expedited review.
Okay. Corey, are you typing this too? Perfect. Okay, straw poll for that. 5. All right, open the list up.
List up again. All right.
We have zoning?
Yep.
Okay.
Overall, citywide consideration of single-family residential zoning and its appropriateness. Overall consideration of single-family residential zoning and its appropriateness in a forward-looking city such as Boulder. Forward-looking.
All right, if that's how you want to phrase it.
Well,
Well, I think what's,
what I had was really questions in here,
Yeah.
which is, could Boulder implement a broad rezoning which would allow for increased housing while focusing the new housing into affordable units as much as feasible? Could we modify the city codes to incentivize AH development, which we really don't have those incentives in place except for in a very, very mild manner right now. And that comes down to zoning, and it comes down to tagging incentives even more broadly than we did with community benefit to zoning and affordable housing.
yeah.
So I get where you're going, but I want to make sure that we
Yeah.
are clear on what we're voting on. Judy was first.
Okay, so this is the only idea that's come up so far that I'm actually against rather than neutral or for. I just think it's too much, too big, too sweeping, and just would be really jumping into the hornet's nest.
We don't have to talk about,
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, we're just doing straw polling here.
What I'm getting is the implication that single-family of zoning is not needed or not good. I don't know what we're going with it. It's like questioning it, but questioning it in a good way, bad way, change it, down, up.
I'm questioning it in, so to speak, a bad way. I don't think single-family zoning, I mean, it's a major portion of what we have in our world currently. I don't know that it serves us well as a community as far as housing our workforce. And, I mean, I hate to call it workforce because it sounds like I'm making a company town here. Which maybe we are. But I think the idea is that, as we've seen around the country in a number of different places, people are questioning single-family zoning, and I think we should be questioning single-family zoning. We should be looking at potentially aligning densities or saturation limits for a number of duplexes, but I don't think that any neighborhood should be off limits for a house other than a single-family house.
Mason.
So what I'd hope is that we don't get into debating back and forth whether or not we believe in single-family zoning, because I think that could be downright bloody this evening. But what I do think is the interesting piece of what you're saying is that we do have cities and states across the country that are looking into it. And if we are a community that is, and we're currently grappling with it in social media and other areas, that I think if we're going to talk about looking at socioeconomic or anything along those lines, it'd be an interesting frame of a conversation of it's time.
Okay, I'm going to say this super quick. I actually was talking to Sam Weaver about this, and part of the way that Minnesota got their zoning passed was they had design guidelines for how duplexes had to look. So they had to look kind of like single-family homes.
Form-based code.
Right, form-based code.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a route that you might want to take? Like,
Well,
because that's not saying.
I think that's
Yeah.
one piece of it.
Okay,
Yeah, as Mason says, is this something we should be looking at?
Okay.
That's the question.
all right, restate it one more time, and then we're going to go for this.
Okay. I want to be careful that I get you might understand where it's at, but people need to be able to work through this process and understand that before we thumbs up and thumbs down something, somebody's got to understand what we're talking about. So I understand the sense of urgency, but let's not shut off the dialogue so that we can't each feel heard. So if anybody else wants to feel heard before we rush through the thumbs up or thumbs down.
I just want to make sure it's explicit that we know what we're
Exactly.
thumbs upping and thumbs down.
Yes.
And that also.
So try to be concise.
So know what we're doing before.
What is your ask to
we
council?
Thumbs up and thumbs down.
The ask to council is that they put on their work plan a consideration of, or a reconsideration of the zoning in the city of Boulder as regards single-family housing.
Perfect. Straw poll. 2.
Adam, I have a little question. The straw poll that we're doing, when we're all done, will that be the things, or will we then vote on each?
Well, we have 2 right now, so I'm hoping we don't get more than 4, so we'll just have them.
Right?
Okay. Next on the list was
Well, I don't think we need to leave this one on the list. That's the city-owned
City-owned
properties. One
properties,
that can
yeah.
go, but I think what we did is we flipped 4 and 1. The pilot program is what we were talking about before, that Danny kind of clarified
Right.
for me. Okay?
we already voted yes on that.
Yeah. The other one that I have is an effort to review the city permitting process.
Right.
And review process for single-family homes, specifically, in regards to how that process negatively impacts the costs for families trying to stay in their houses.
Any questions regarding that? Is everyone comfortable voting there?
Yeah, I think it's great. That's a great cause. I would even expand it to not just single-family homes and not just people trying to stay in their homes, just in general, the process for which to remodel, pop the top, anything. That's my 2
I
cents.
just want to keep it within the scope of housing, obviously.
Well, yeah, I mean, housing, obviously is housing. I'm not talking about building, a commercial building.
I guess I'm just asking the question, since we have already determined that our overarching lens is the 15% plus affordability goal, does that work into that?
I think that goes to the matter of maintaining the middle as well, because middle income people have to leave in some cases, like Jacques was referencing.
And I'm fine leaving it, Jacques. I'm fine leaving what you just said, Jacques. If you want to leave it that way, it's fine.
Yeah, I wanted to focus it specifically on that middle income group, because at the lower income, it's arguable that there are many pop-tops happening, and at the higher income, they are happy to pay the architects, and the architects are happy to collect as much as they need for as many.
I'm with you. I hear you.
So that's all.
I think quantifying it is going to be hard.
Is maybe difficult.
You know what I mean? How do you say this project is a middle-income project, and so it should get special review treatment versus this is a high-end, how do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think
That's the only thing I
No, I
see.
think you're right. Just to, I guess, express myself, I think I'm putting the focus on it just so that council would see where it's really impacting one of their programs or one of their
Goals.
So maybe AMI, that's what,
Is it value of the house? I'm with you, I agree with you. what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah,
I'm just trying to figure out how to flesh it out a
would
little
have to
bit.
look at and figure out, right? But the idea is to,
This is like the tiny homes thing. We don't have to
Yeah.
Right.
completely specify.
But what I would say here is I think it's important for us to articulate the notion that, we're focused on middle income here. Not to say, I mean, it'll be hard to quantify, but that's the point we want to get across because, there'll be a lot of time to, flesh that out, but that's where the impact is.
Okay, let's just restate it.
okay. Let me get to where I am. That we engage in review of city ordinances and implementation of building code in an effort to streamline and reduce cost for middle-income families trying to remodel and stay in their homes.
Great, straw poll. Five. Anything else on your list?
I'm off. Well, nah,
No, don't add.
I added one more.
Okay, we had private-public partnerships was what yours was. Do you want to try to state it in a way that's more nuanced than that, or?
Yeah, I'd say explore partnerships with other public or private employers in an effort to expand housing opportunities for and commuter employees.
Mason?
brilliant. We're doing it with transportation. I think it's awesome.
Anyone else? Anyone need clarity? Okay. Yeah, Jay.
Explore opportunities to collaborate. So, again, I just use a school district to say, will they work with us towards developing some project where, school district employees such as teachers will have, primary opportunity to purchase units in that development. Another one might be if the school district was a master lessor on a project, and then they can put employees in there when there's need, especially if somebody's relocating here. I think it's a pretty broad notion, but the whole idea is that's really something I think we need to focus on to really enhance the opportunities, enhance the funding for these things, and also bring the responsibility to employers that are, essentially, any employer is part of the problem within commuting, right? So this is a way for them to assume some of the responsibility of the impacts that they're causing.
Yep, I would just encourage you to add the word continue.
Continue, okay, yeah,
Just because we already do that.
already doing, all right, great, continue.
Are you talking about only public employers, or are you talking about
Public
private
and
sector
private.
employers? Because I would submit that public employers are probably pretty cash-strapped right now and wouldn't even have resources to finance or subsidize housing for their employees.
Right, and so,
Just having children in the BVSD system and knowing what parents have to pay outside of just,
and understood.
Right.
There's also funding priorities, and there's a lot of other financing mechanisms that any public entity can utilize if they want to generate money for something of value. But I think public and private employers, and that doesn't mandate for anybody, but certainly it puts some of the onus on them to try to help be part of the solution. And I think that's a good stepping stone for this. And if it's going on already, then we say continue, so.
So then do we need to say it at all if it's just going on right now? Or do we want a deep dive, asking for a deep dive?
You're asking to reinforce?
Yeah,
Do more.
Yeah.
yeah.
Jay literally said it, continue.
I always think it's worthwhile to reinforce because they're going to focus their attention in certain directions. And if they like that recommendation of ours, then they'll make sure to enhance it as much as possible. So I think it's worthwhile. I think you should keep it for a straw vote.
Great, let's take a straw vote. Four. I don't know what to do with that one then.
That's the majority.
It is a majority, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We didn't have any more, I believe. That was it. So the four that we have, if I did this correctly, is Tiny Homes Pilot Project. Whatever's Jock's was about larger projects, or sorry, small projects, but pilot projects.
Yeah.
Okay. Expedite regulations for middle-income housing. That was another.
Yeah.
Approvals, yep. And then the continue private-public partnerships.
Did the state tax thing, that moved up above?
That rolled to
Up above? to
Yeah.
What we
plan on doing. Okay. Do you want to take a break since we're halfway through? Okay, 5-minute break.
Good.
I don't think we have very many on this next list either. Okay. So we have our 4 items for suggestion to council. Now we need to talk about what we want to focus on beyond what council brings us from their work plan. Currently, the main things that we do are certain engagement pieces, like the listening sessions, and that's the main thing right now. We have a few regional housing strategy, but that hasn't been very active recently, as far as I can recall. You're still on that, correct? Okay. And the 2 things that we have as suggestions for additional focus are working on items going to the state legislature, and then the potential of some sort of oversight committee for renters. Were there any others? Those are the only 2 that I picked up on.
Same again?
The additional focus on legislative issues going to the state government and a potential oversight committee for renters. Okay?
I guess my question that we have for all of us before we decide if we want to add those, which I do favor, is are there actually volunteers to be on those committees?
Well, we don't have to form the committee right now. This is just something that we are going to put in the letter as a potential action that the
Okay.
board is going to take, just because we think it's an important point. And maybe worth saying in the letter, maybe not, depending upon how the straw poll goes. And we can have a discussion and formation about the committee itself later on. Yeah. You had your hand up?
No, I was just, is there anything you would like to add, Jay, to that? Just because I value your opinion?
Well, I thank you. Unfortunately, I was trying to do something else, so I wasn't listening. I was preparing for my agenda items. What was the question? Sorry.
What are your thoughts on an oversight committee for renters?
I would be cautious of calling it an oversight committee. I mean, both oversight and committee are pretty loaded terms. I mean, basically what you would be doing is listening to people's concerns and trying to direct them in a constructive way to the appropriate resources, right?
Which honestly, I think is half the battle. The people that we were even talking to was about getting them to the right, having 5 different housing boards, right? There's 5 different housing boards and people not sure whether or not something goes to planning board. So, I think it's just, it's directing, it's not making decisions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which we can define later.
I just don't know how to, if we're going to put it in the letter, how we phrase it.
Clearinghouse, Renters Clearinghouse Forum or something like that?
It's more than renters, because there are some that have bought into, that are being managed by like Thistle or BHP, or, like we had
Right.
transportation bundling questions when we very first formed.
HOAs, homeowners are concerned about HOA fees.
Yep, exactly.
So it's almost like a complaint department.
Kind of is. It kind of is. I mean, and I think people need to feel like they, hey, I get that it's like, but I mean, I literally, and here's my antidote to it, is I literally was at the dog park and somebody came out of the housing complex and walked all the way across and said, are you Mason Moyer, are you on the Housing Advisory Board? And then asked me if I would listen to, she said she's gone everywhere and needed, and ultimately we came to some kind of good paths of where to go, but I think that's who we are, right? We are of the people, for the people on this board, and we're supposed to be the connection for city council. So I think having that place where people feel like they have somebody on this board to contact.
Maybe Housing Resources Committee? Because that way we're connecting people with where they need to go.
I like that.
So I just have one concern. I think that's a lovely idea and a lovely name. The reason why it got bumped up to the top part, it initially started as our interest in recognizing some recognition that 50% of the residents are renters. And unless we say something in the letter, which can be in the top part about renters specifically, we are then leaving out a really important part of our population.
Terry?
I guess my question is, forming a committee to hear renters, owners' problems, I mean, how are they going to know? I mean, what's the difference between that and just coming here in open public session and just saying what they need to say every once a month?
From what we've seen, a lot of people are unwilling to do that
Oh, okay.
Or unable.
or unable.
Is
so-
excess in
But they
time.
can email us anytime and ask a
Sure.
question, right?
But we want to make sure that we have some go-to people who are sort of in charge of that, I think
Okay.
is
I see what you're saying.
desire here. Yes.
I mean, my feeling as I'm hearing this is that really, I mean, again, it's part of the public outreach, but what we're trying to do, and I think it's a worthy thing, is we are trying to create a public awareness that the housing board is a go-to place, whether it's just an email or whether they want to come in, or we specifically do listening sessions for that, or as a piece of a certain number of our meetings. But we, that could be decided. But I think it's a valuable thing. I think it's worth, as Judy says, pointing out to council that we're also focused on the renter, and that we are going to try to be that liaison and be a place where they can go.
Well, since this was your idea, do you want to just try restricting it to renters, or do you, we can obviously include other people too, but,
No, yeah, I shouldn't have said renter.
Yeah.
okay.
I think it should be open to anybody that needs housing advisory board help.
Okay. Well, unless we can try to define it any better, we just got to straw poll it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So potentially forming a housing resources committee on the Housing Advisory Board.
For the public, yeah.
Straw poll. Cool.
But now I would also like to see if there's some way we can figure out in getting in the top part of the letter that we all agree about, something about renters. Even if we just have a simple sentence that says, we are particularly interested in renters, since,
Here's my suggestion. We're going to probably say something about continued listening sessions, and we could maybe say that renters who make up 50% of our population and renters' rights might be one of our potential listening sessions.
I like that.
Cool. Let's go on to the other one, state legislative items, just trying to have a focus as a board on those.
So we're saying to council, we're just trying to have a focus on this?
We're hopefully gonna, yeah. So Jay, do you want to talk just a little bit more to this point? Because it was something that you brought up, was
Stop calling on me.
that we should potentially be a more lobbying board for state legislative issues surrounding housing.
So you want me to say more about that? Or do you want me to help you articulate what that would look like?
Articulate what that would look like, so the board understands what they're voting for.
So I think it's, HAB would play a stronger role in advocating for housing issues at the state level. Something as simple as that.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was just curious, so that you're saying this is something that's somewhere being discussed or has been discussed. I'm just curious the origination of it or where it's living.
Well, so the city has a legislative agenda that they craft prior to every session. That is something that's coordinated through Carl Castillo at the city. And he works with, the city has lobbyists, which is pretty interesting. And then there's also all sorts of organizations out there. So there's the Municipal League of Colorado, there's Housing Colorado, probably half a dozen others who advocate on housing issues. A lot of what we do as staff is we rely on Housing Colorado to represent sort of the municipal interests at the state legislature. So they track bills, they have a legislative committee, and we typically will support them in their efforts. They would like greater support also from the cities, potentially from individuals to advocate specifically for housing issues. Does that help?
That helps me.
Terry?
Are we allowed as a board to do that? Or doesn't, you know, we can just sit here and decide we want to send a letter or whatever, take a position on a state issue without getting council approval or anything like that?
That is a good point.
I mean, you know.
I mean,
we have the
individually,
authority
of
to do
course,
that.
you can.
Individually, yeah, no, I'm saying as a board.
As a board, you know, I think as long as it's consistent with the city's legislative agenda.
Oh, clearly.
If you want to go off script, I would not recommend that. So that's where you might get in trouble.
Let's make,
So does that mean we can only say what city council is going to say anyway?
Well, assuming city council is going to say something, I mean, they don't track every issue, but, you know, think of it not necessarily responding to each individual bill that comes out, but how do we shape the actual agenda? You know, what are the issues that are important to Boulder? How do we get that on the various our organizations' agenda? That's what we will be talking about in January and February. Housing Colorado will basically come to the board and explain this is what we see as priorities, and you can help them inform their what they finally propose.
Gotcha.
So if we indicate an interest in that, then you can like put us on the list so we get that same information and we can then, in a committee or something, coordinate?
Yeah, or you could do it as the full board as well, yeah.
Yeah, my only question here, this is like a murky area because it feels like we're committing to something way more than we might be if it's just someone coming and giving us a presentation, which we have happen all the time. So it's almost like we're voting on an agenda item in my mind, which is a little bit beyond what we normally do.
Well, I don't think it's a role that's been specifically defined for you in the charter. I would actually want to go back and double check it. I could
Okay.
do that while you guys chat. But I think what you're basically asking council or you know, or
Telling
maybe even you're
council.
telling council is would like to play a more active role in state legislative issues. And just keep it that
I
simple.
like it,
Yep.
just like that.
I like that
Just like
phrasing
that.
too.
I'd also like to mention that in our Housing Advisory Board page, it says that one of our things to do is to advise City Council concerning an appropriate advocacy for the city in state and federal housing matters. So we're already okay to be doing that. It's already in.
Well, the key there is you're advising council.
Yeah, not.
Oh, I see, rather than.
And I suppose maybe that's the twist in this, is that we would say we want to increase our engagement with state legislative issues in order to advise council on those things. So what we would do essentially is look at it, and then we would write a recommendation, a brief recommendation to council in our meeting minutes, and it would go to council and say, hey, this is happening right now. We think it's really important that this city
Take
put a
a
little extra
position.
effort on it.
That sounds
And then
perfect.
council could say, okay, housing board, would you engage further on that one?
Yeah, that's good.
Because that seems like that's how that has to roll out.
Could we just sort of could we leave it off our letter thoughts right now and have you get a little more clarification on it? And then we can add a sentence to the letter if we want, since it's not a huge.
Why don't we straw poll whether or not we want it on there?
Okay.
Yeah, let's just do the straw poll. Play a more active role in state legislative issues for recommendation to council. 7.
So I will research it and get back to you if it's going to be an issue or a concern.
Yeah, or just how it might be structured.
Okay, so those were the only 2 issues we had, or not issues, but potential things that we're going to add. So that brings us to how are we actually going to get the letter written? We know all the topics. We know it starts with 15+% affordable housing goal. Anyone want to volunteer to make that happen, or
What's the timeframe?
we have to approve it next meeting?
Oh,
So-
I'll volunteer.
But it has to be done before the agenda goes out so we can all look at it
Correct.
ahead of time. So a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 2-page limit for sure.
No
Also,
specific font.
No double space.
Big enough so I can read it.
11 points.
I want to make sure I clarify. Are we okay including the parts? Can you pull up the letter again, Jay, that Judy had at the beginning about what we did this past year in regards to the listening sessions? And
These
I like that a lot.
already.
I like that part a lot.
did anyone have any issues with that? Okay, perfect. So just so everyone knows what we're trying to go for ultimately, and it needs to be done before the next agenda meeting in November.
Did we do a calendar check too? We're on for November, right? Just not December?
I'll bring that.
We'll bring that up.
Okay, I was like, wait.
Matters from staff.
Coming.
Okay, is everyone good leaving that where that is? We have you two working on it, perfect. Okay, we'll move on to ideas for the next listening session. Obviously, we just talked about a whole lot of things that could potentially be there. But we should probably talk about when we might want the next one to be first. And my best estimate is we don't have enough time to do one before November, plus that's gonna be not in this room and not, or sort of around holiday season, so, January?
Huh?
Yes.
It would be helpful to know what else we would have on the agenda for that night so that we weren't cramming too many items into one night. If we're trying to do a listening session and have plenty of ample time, I think
Sure.
it's important to have ample time.
Mason?
And along with what you're saying is, how about just a couple of people, like the letter, coming together real quick and reviewing the work plan and making a suggested like editorial calendar of listening sessions and presenting it back to the board?
Instead of going through it now?
Yeah, so instead of us just trying to, like, maybe two people sit down and say, okay, we've got these meetings in 2020, these work items, see how we could fit a couple listening sessions into them, and take some ideas on what everybody would want to have for listening session ideas.
So I just want to say the lead time for being able to do the publicity for a topic, if we really want to do something in January, we have to pick the topic, like settle on the first topic. We don't have to pick all of them, but we have to pick the first topic in November for sure, if not tonight, if there's not one we all agree on tonight.
Well, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, and personally, when, I mean, does everybody have kids here at the table? Like, most people go through the holiday season, well, I know, Adam. You know, after the holidays, I don't know about you guys, but we either go on family vacations or we chill for the month of January because it gets so intense on those first ones. So I don't know if, and we also will be hearing back from city council on the work plan. So do we want to wait till Feb anyway for the first one?
Sounds like that's the most reasonable
Yeah.
thing to do. Okay.
I agree.
So we'll plan on February. I don't need to have a full discussion, but I just want to keep some topics that we have mentioned in the past in mind. Renters' rights or something around being a renter in Boulder. We also talked about accessibility for people with disabilities and seniors. We talked about students. Jacques?
And I would talk about process, city process.
Right, those are, I was going to get to the list of new ones, but I just
Okay.
wanted to go
Oh,
through
those are the older ones.
Those are the older ones, and I thought they were all really important, so all good potential. And then we have the newer ones, the city processes, the tiny homes, the pilot projecting, and public-private partnerships. Yes,
Housing preference,
housing preference.
listening.
For in commuters too.
For in commuters,
Yeah.
yep.
So I want to just mention something. At a previous meeting, we voted, which we can change, but we did vote, I believe, that we weren't going to have listening sessions about topics that were in the city's work plan because we'd be having public hearings about them. So we have to take that into consideration too. So maybe the one in February, we should pick something that we believe isn't going to come up in the work plan.
Terry?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I do remember that. I recall that happening, and we didn't want to double up. So I think that's just a matter of seeing where we are at in January and then going from there.
And I think, if we had the little committee for a couple of weeks forming the calendar on this, like accessibility for seniors, that could be February. Because nothing says, come on out in the snow, like February listening session for accessibility.
So I
It
guess,
will wait till spring.
I guess depending upon our calendar here, we have to determine who's going to be on that committee to make those decisions, since we
It's
we
not
have to
decisions, just
vote.
recommendation.
Right,
Yeah.
that you're right. But we have to vote if we want to have one in February by January at the latest.
Yeah.
Oh.
I would say
It needs 2 months to do the publicity.
the calendar could be done in
Yeah.
a week and a half.
Okay.
Somebody could submit it by next one. I
Gotcha.
don't mind working on it if somebody else wants to work on it with me. Juliet, do you want to work on it with me, since I know we want to look at figure out a calendar and compare it with the work plan that we know of right now, which should shift in January.
Sure.
Okay.
Great.
Do you want me to talk
We'll
about
submit back an idea.
Did you want me to talk about the work plan a little bit?
Yes.
Would that be helpful? So we're kind of in a very unusual time in Boulder. So it's, it happens regularly, but, so we do have a new council coming in. So the previous council, there was a lot of work and a lot of effort to get certain priorities done this year, which is why your calendar was so full. But coming up, there's really not a lot of agenda items before you. So there's not specific projects going to council, primarily because the new council has to weigh in and determine what their priorities are going to be. So I will be talking to you about potentially canceling either November or December, or even potentially both, for primarily that reason, but also the holidays. But your listening session, I think, is the main agenda item coming up, the discussion about the legislative effort. And then a lot of the other work isn't going to come before you, like community benefit, the next phase, any sort of new work plan items. It's going to be spring of 2020. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of warning that there's going to be a lull.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on, we added a item, discussion of the trends report and potentially adding that to one of our agendas. You want to speak again to that?
Yeah, so again, the Community Foundation Serving Boulder County does research on an ongoing basis, and every 2 years they put out a trends report. And they've done a fair amount of publicity about it in Longmont and in Boulder. And this 2-year segment, they have identified the biggest challenge facing Boulder County are its housing and rising prices. And it's an excellent presentation, and they do a good right brain, left brain presentation where they give a few personal stories and then they give a lot of data. And it's some data that I don't recall having heard before that I think would be really helpful for all of us. And I also think it would be helpful for the few people who may watch us on television. I think it's actually really helpful for the community to have that information out there, just for giving us where housing fits into our city and into the larger county. And so I hope that we will agree to invite them. They said they'd cut down their presentation, so it would be 1/2 hour long with 15 minutes if we want to use the 15 minutes for questions. And I'd like to have us decide to do it and then work to get it scheduled at a time that works in the next several months when the meeting will be here and televised.
Gotcha. That's the kicker right there. So that
Yeah.
means not November or December.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we can just do a straw poll on who has an interest in getting the trends report, and the most likely time would probably be January. Good?
Yep, we'll make sure it happens.
Okay.
Jay, it sounds like we wouldn't have a lot of things on our agenda at that meeting, right? January?
January?
Necessarily.
Nope.
Okay, so it'd be a good
This might be
good
it.
time to do it.
Good way to start the year.
So I'll coordinate that with you with Chris Barge, who you probably know, right?
Nope.
No, okay, so I'll coordinate it to make sure he could come at that time, and thanks.
And now we move on to matters from staff.
And my computer just went to sleep. So there was some questions about sort of where things are with specific projects. So I'll talk about community benefit first, and then the TMP update, as well as 30 Pearl, and then the regional housing strategy. And then we'll talk about meetings as well. So community benefit, it passed, council passed the Housing Advisory Board's recommendation. They, based on your feedback, they did remove the reference to, or the exemption for nursing homes and assisted living. So they deferred that to phase 2. And they did keep Appendix J. However, they added 2 areas that are zoned RH3 that are near the Boulder Valley Regional Center. And they extended the expiration date to May 2021. And those are the highlights. Any questions about that? Does that make sense? Were folks tracking that? Was that helpful?
Thanks for clarifying, just because I had no idea what they actually ended up voting on when it came to that meeting.
I was watching that and I was like, what?
Yeah. So,
Did they know what they voted on?
I hope so.
but that,
So they opted to extend.
One more year. So
Yep.
that was staff's recommendation, because that would give us additional time to see how it's going in those specific areas. But yeah, no, I think the idea is that they do still want to see it expire at some point.
Yeah.
Anything else with that? Transportation master plan? So I think the desire here was to look at what are the intersections with housing in terms of this latest update. The thing to keep in mind with the transportation master plan is it's updated every 5 years. So the changes are fairly minor, each update to update. This one really had a focus on safety and the Vision Zero initiative that's been happening. So that was incorporated. There's 50 action items that are from that report. There's also revisions to the pedestrian plan based on feedback from 18-member community working group.
quick question.
Sure.
Are those action items prioritized in any way, or are they just action items?
I'd have to go back and look.
Okay. That's always a question I have when it comes to these major things is, do we have priorities?
Right. No, that's a great question. I'm sure the transportation staff could answer that. I don't know for sure. The one that's really more housing focused, the neighborhood accessibility, sort of that 15-minute neighborhood concept. There's a GIS tool that was developed and it's used to identify specific improvements that could be made. So, I mean, that's where we're trying to get at the prioritization. What are the tools to help us identify where we should be focusing our resources? Also, the development, part of that 15-minute neighborhood piece is developing a low-stress walk and bike network throughout the city so that there are easy connections where people feel comfortable walking or biking. A lot of focus on transit service and a new study that was done, as well as continuing to strengthen and build regional partnerships based on the US 36 model, particularly for the Diagonal Highway and State Highway 7 to Brighton. So trying to incorporate bus rapid transit and other issues. And then integrating access management and parking strategy, AMPS, remember that one? I worked on that for a while, but incorporating a lot of the findings from that into the formal transportation master plan. And there are a bunch of other things, but I think those were the highlights. But any questions about that? And then can I present, pretty please?
Did you skip 30 Pearl?
I'm going to talk about it right now.
Okay.
No. There we go. So the 30 Pearl disposition went to council last month, and basically closing will happen November 7th, I believe. And you could see construction happening as early as 3 to 4 weeks from now. So things are moving along. So just a little bit of background. So it's the old Pollard site at 30th and Pearl. Boulder Housing Partners was selected as the master co-developer. And it has a whole mix of permanently affordable housing, market housing, and I'll talk about each quadrant just really very quickly. So quadrant 1 will be sold to Morgan Creek Ventures. They will build 76 market rate residential units with ground floor commercial. So 50% of that will be below market rents for commercial. Where's 30th? So Boulder Junction. Oh, on the left.
Left side.
Yeah, left side.
And Pearl is underneath.
Pearl is to the south, Goose Creek is to the north, and the Hyatt Hotel is on the right.
Yep. The Hilton is off to the right
Or Hilton,
before us.
thank you.
Jake, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Is there a definition?
Is there a definition on the below market rate rent?
There is, I want to say it's 25% the current market rate for that area, and it can only appreciate based on the consumer price index annually. And there are requirements that you either be, I believe it's local, actually it changed at the last minute, so I'm a little hesitant to tell you exactly, but there are specific requirements, so priorities for nonprofits and also local businesses. So that quadrant 1 will be sold, and the proceeds from that will help to pay for the permanently affordable housing on the other quadrants. Quadrant 2 and actually the other quadrants will be conveyed to Boulder Housing Partners, and they will build a parking structure underneath quadrants 2 and 3, and then it will transfer back to the city, and the city will sell quadrant 3. But quadrant 2, they will develop 80 permanently affordable homes between 30 and 60% AMI. 10 of those will be permanently supportive. Quadrant 3, as I said, will sell to a private developer 62 market rate condominiums. Prior to that, they'll build the parking structure. 4 North will be sold to a private developer, and the intention there is to develop homeownership units, co-housing or a co-op. And quadrant 4 will be conveyed also for 40 permanently affordable homes, 30 to 60% AMI, and 20 of those will be dedicated to independent living. So that's a very quick overview of what's going on there. Any questions about that?
How much did quadrant 1 sell for?
I'd have to go back and check.
And I'm sorry, one more question. On the reduced rent on quadrant 1, what was that again? It has to be 20?
25% below the prevailing market rents for that area.
For that, okay, like that area.
So it's not the citywide.
Not
I
citywide.
think it's like I want to say it's like a 1 mile radius.
1 mile radius.
1 mile radius.
They do that on like per square foot or bedrooms, or how do they do it?
So it's commercial space only.
Oh, the commercial spaces, so all the
Commercial
rest is market rate.
Yep.
Interesting, got it.
Could you go back to the first page for me for a second? I just wanted to look at numbers. I'm sorry, the second page. Next one, there, so 76. Okay, thanks.
I guess I do have just one question. Sure. On the permanently supportive housing and the one on the last page that was for people with disabilities and this and that, I'm guessing that for sure some sort of support for those people are built into the project in one way or another?
Correct, yeah. That's necessary, yeah, there has to be some sort of, that's why it's permanently supportive.
Yeah, great, okay, thanks.
Anybody else?
Is the 10 in addition to the 80, or it's a part of the 80?
I believe it's 10 is 10 out of the 80 will be set aside.
Good.
Okay. And then the final one is the regional housing strategy. And I know, I think I heard you guys talking a little bit earlier about it's been quiet for a little bit in terms of that front. So is everyone familiar with the regional housing strategy, particularly new members? Did you have a chance to look through this? So it identifies a number of strategies. Establish a regional goal, which we've done, bolster financial resources, secure land, development, redevelopment opportunities, preserve affordability, and consider regulatory processes. So we've been making progress on all those fronts. Of course, we've adopted the goal. The next big focus is going to be really around bolstering financial resources. So I think you all heard Council and Boulder County commissioners have agreed to place on the 2020 ballot a property tax measure that would raise approximately $20 million countywide that would be distributed throughout the county. And starting probably in early to late spring, there'll be more of a push to help educate the community on the benefits and the need. And I don't know, have you guys seen this by any chance? So this will be part of the campaign that will be kicking off in the spring. And they have also been, you'll probably be seeing it on the sides of buses and other places, but they wanted to be strategic about when they started that effort. So you'll be seeing more, and also you will be hearing more about the regional housing strategy and what sort of role you guys could play as sort of helping to promote the regional partnership. So there is a mailing list, and I'm trying to figure out a way to add all of HAB so that all new members get included as well. But basically what you would there aren't that many emails. I think it's like once every month. They basically talk about progress that's being made by the different jurisdictions, what efforts are coming up, but it's a good resource just to stay tuned with it.
Do you know the specifics of the tax? You don't have to say what they are. I'm just wondering.
I know the dollar value, and I think that based on the polling, they're leaning towards a property tax as opposed to a sales tax.
Okay. 20 million just doesn't seem like that much, especially countywide.
Yeah, and I think the 20 million was backed into based on, what do we need to do to achieve the goal of 12% countywide?
Gotcha.
And how much has to be invested. So, there's sort of a rationale behind it, but I think it was also what would be, palatable to the voters.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
0 is a lot less than 20.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else there?
The only other thing is, as I mentioned, the November and December meetings, as you guys have talked about, are very light on agenda items. We will also be off-site because they're displaced by the holidays, so they would not be televised. Also, we will not have a board secretary for November, and December coincides with the department holiday party. Not that those are any reason not to have a meeting. Just, I think others are going to have similar situation in terms of commitments around the holidays, and considering that there are not very many agenda items, the board might want to consider canceling one or both of those meetings and resuming in the new year. So I bring that up just for your discussion. We will have the meetings if that's the desire of the group, but it would also be helpful if you could identify specific agenda items and what you would like to talk about.
So the only thing that I can even recall that we have to decide on for sure is the letter to council, and that has to be voted on, so we have to have a meeting for it, and what our next listening session potential topic will be. Mason?
So I'm down for a November, and I would say skip December.
I agree with that.
Looks like the November meeting would be the day before Thanksgiving.
No, we've already changed those dates.
We did, okay.
Just so you know.
Okay.
Can you remind us of what the,
We're on the website. Let me pull that up really quick.
Okay, good, November 20th.
It's the Wednesday before the normal one, so it would be the
November
third
10th.
Wednesday.
November 20.
Sorry, yes, 20.
So I also think have November and skip December. I think we have to have November. Maybe it won't be too long, but.
that's sort of my feeling as well. Okay. We'll see.
Well, the reality of it is then we'll know whether or not he is here, and we'll still have to make a decision about chair.
Yeah,
So December,
Right.
November.
So it's good to
Sorry.
have a November meeting.
Okay, let's plan on November, no December.
And do they need to vote on that, Corey?
Yes, officially.
Okay.
Okay.
So we don't have to vote on having a November meeting because we're already going to have one. So this is a vote to not have a December meeting. All those in favor?
Thank you.
Unanimous. Okay, debrief, calendar check. I thought this process was a whole lot better than our last annual letter, especially since we kind of know what is expected of us and we're adhering to that. Thank you for the new people. I realize that it's a little bit weird to go through this the first time, but it felt like you sort of came along with us since we've already gotten the wrist slap before. And I appreciate that. That made it a lot easier than trying to reinvent the wheel all over again, so.
yeah, I would probably add on that debrief that a lot of the smoothness to this was the work that you did beforehand, Judy, with preparing the letter and having that for all of us to review. So it was a good jump off point. We didn't have that last time, so it was a shit show.
In general, anytime a discussion can be framed around a couple of bullet points really helps the cause.
Yep.
Thank you, Judy.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Judy.
All in favor? Thank you,
Okay.
Judy.
Great.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, we are adjourned.
Thank you. And we're 35 minutes early.
Travel safely, it's snowing out there.
Although somehow somebody added my name.